Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I'm Hari.
And I'm Kimi. Today, we are taking a deep dive into an incredibly moving, profound, and often misunderstood chapter of history. We are discussing the life of Truganini, a prominent Aboriginal Tasmanian woman.
That's right, Kimi. If you've heard the name Truganini before, it might be tied to a very persistent but completely inaccurate historical myth. She was widely and wrongly described for decades as the quote-unquote last surviving Aboriginal Tasmanian.
It is wild how long that myth endured. But before we get to how that narrative was completely dismantled by modern scholars and the surviving Aboriginal community, we need to talk about her actual life, which was extraordinarily eventful. She was born around 1812 in the Rochelle Bay area, part of the Nuanoni people.
Her father, Manganera, was the senior man of the Nuanoni clan. By the time Truganini was born, British colonization had already started violently disrupting their way of life. The settler population exploded from around 5,000 in 1819 to over 23,000 by 1830, and the impact on her family was utterly devastating.
The tragedy she endured in her youth is heartbreaking. Her mother was murdered by a group of sailors, two of her sisters were kidnapped by sealers, and according to an account by a surveyor, her fiancé, Parawina, was murdered by timber cutters, who threw him out of a boat and cut off his hands when he tried to climb back in.
It's just a horrifying reality of the Black War, the violent conflict raging across Tasmania at the time. In response to this, the colonial governor George Arthur tried an experiment on Bruny Island, appointing a man named George Augustus Robinson to set up a ration station. Robinson was a devout Christian who hoped to save the Aboriginal population by essentially resettling them.
Robinson met Truganini in 1829. He established a Christian mission at Missionary Bay, trying to use her presence to entice her father and others to join. But disease quickly struck the mission. Eventually, Truganini left, though Robinson kept pursuing her. She reluctantly married a Nuanoni elder named Waretti, whom Robinson viewed as a crucial ally.
And this kicks off a major chapter in her life. In 1830, Robinson gets approval for a friendly mission to contact and relocate the remaining Aboriginal peoples. Truganini, suffering from advanced syphilis at the time, still managed to act as a vital guide. She dived for shellfish, gathered plants, and frankly, kept the expedition going. She actually saved Robinson's life multiple times. It's one of those lesser-known facts that really flips the script on the colonial power dynamic. In 1832, she swam him across the Arthur River to escape hostile warriors. 2 years later, she swam out to his raft and towed it to the riverbank after it got caught in a swift current. She was incredibly resourceful.
You'd hope that kind of loyalty would be rewarded, but colonial history rarely works that way. By 1835, Robinson declared his mission a success, claiming he had exiled the entire Aboriginal population of the mainland. He got land, money, and a pension. Truganini and the other guides, they were exiled to the Waibelena establishment on Flinders Island.
And the conditions at Waibelena were atrocious. Out of 300 people who surrendered to Robinson, only 112 were alive there in 1835. There was little food, poor water, and rampant disease. Robinson tried to strip them of their culture, renaming Truganini Lalarook after an Irish poem and forcing her into sewing classes. She was miserable, telling Robinson that soon there would be no one left alive to inhabit the houses he was building.
Fast forward to 1839, Robinson is transferred to the newly colonized Port Phillip district, what is now Victoria, and takes Truganini and about 15 others with him. The women were left with very little to do, though Truganini tried to relieve her boredom by weaving baskets. Eventually, the situation deteriorated.
It deteriorated into a full-blown outlaw saga. By 1841, Truganini and 4 companions ran away. They set fire to a settler's hut, stole weapons, and went on the run. The group ended up shooting and beating 2 whalers to death, mistaking them for a search party. They were eventually ambushed and taken to Melbourne as prisoners.
The resulting trial was a landmark legal moment. The defense counsel, Redmond Barry, argued it was unfair to try members of an alien people in a British court. Because they weren't Christians, they couldn't even testify in their own defense. The women, including Truganini, were acquitted, but the 2 men, Malboy Heener and Pive, were hanged in 1842.
It was the first legal execution in the Port Phillip district, and it caused Truganini immense anguish. She was sent back to Waibelena and later to Oyster Cove. By the 1860s, she was one of the few Aboriginal residents left there. This sparked a morbid scientific fascination. The settler population viewed them as curiosities. They were even presented to the Duke of Edinburgh in 1868.
When her friend William Lane died in 1869, scientists literally mutilated his body to steal his skeleton for their collections. Truganini was terrified the same would happen to her. She begged her doctor and a minister friend to ensure she would be buried behind the mountains or at sea.
Tragically, when she died in 1876, the Royal Society still campaigned to dig her up. By the late 1880s, her skull was on public display, and her skeleton was exhibited at the Tasmanian Museum well into the 20th century. It is a stark reminder of the dehumanization Indigenous people faced.
It took a massive campaign by the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre for the government to finally pass legislation in 1975 to reclaim her remains. A century after her death in 1976, she was finally cremated and her ashes were scattered in the D'Entrecasteaux Channel, respecting her final wishes.
And that brings us full circle to her legacy. The government used her death to declare the Aboriginal population extinct, but they were ignoring a substantial community of Tasmanian Aboriginals living on the Bass Strait Islands. Today, that community continues to thrive and strongly refutes the extinction myth.
Right. In fact, there was a big controversy in 1993 when the band Midnight Oil referenced Truganini as the last Tasmanian in a song. The Aboriginal community protested and the band apologized. And in 2009, activists successfully stopped Sotheby's from auctioning busts of Truganini, asserting their right to control representations of their ancestors.
She has been transformed in the public eye from a tragic final victim into a symbol of anti-colonial resistance and Indigenous endurance. It's a heavy story, but an essential one to understand the true history of Australia.
Well said, Kimmy. Thank you all for joining us today for this important conversation. We hope it gave you a deeper appreciation for Truganini's life and the ongoing resilience of the Tasmanian Aboriginal community. Until next time, take care.
This episode is based on the Wikipedia article Truganini, which is available under the Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike license. This podcast was crafted using artificial intelligence.